In the year 1513, a man sat alone in exile. His name was Niccolò Machiavelli. Just a few months earlier, he had been arrested, tortured, and thrown out of political power. The government he once served had collapsed. The powerful men he advised had abandoned him, and the political world he once navigated so skillfully had turned against him. But exile gave Machiavelli something far more valuable than political power. It gave him time to observe human nature. From a distance, he began reflecting on everything he had witnessed during his years in politics: the betrayals, the alliances, the sudden rises, and even faster falls of powerful leaders. He noticed something disturbing. The people who lost power were not always the weakest. Often, they were intelligent, educated, respected, but they lacked something crucial. They did not understand how human beings actually behave when power is involved. They believed people acted according to morality. They believed loyalty was permanent. They believed honesty was always rewarded. But Machiavelli had seen something different. He had seen men betray their closest allies for influence. He had seen leaders destroyed because they trusted the wrong person. He had seen people lose everything simply because they misunderstood human nature. So during his exile, he began writing a small book, a book that would become one of the most controversial works in history, The Prince. In it, Machiavelli described the psychological rules of power, not the idealistic version of human behavior people like to believe in, but the real version, the one that operates quietly beneath everyday interactions. And if you look carefully at the world today, you'll notice something strange. The people who understand human psychology often rise faster than those who simply work harder. Because the world is not only shaped by effort, it is shaped by perception, influence, and awareness. Today, we are going to explore 8 ruthless lessons inspired by Machiavelli. Lessons that sharpen your awareness. Lessons that protect you from manipulation. Lessons that transform the way you observe people. But understand something important before we begin. These lessons are not about becoming cruel. They are about becoming aware enough that others cannot easily control you. Because once you truly understand human nature, the entire world begins to look different. One of the most dangerous mistakes people make is revealing too much about themselves. They reveal their plans. They reveal their fears. They reveal their ambitions. They reveal their strategies. And they do this because society constantly encourages openness. Be transparent. Be honest. Tell people how you feel. But Machiavelli noticed something uncomfortable. People respect what they cannot fully predict. Mystery creates psychological gravity, and gravity attracts attention. Think about the most intriguing person you've ever met. Maybe it was someone at work. Maybe it was someone you encountered at a social event. Maybe it was someone whose presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. What made them intriguing? It was rarely their words. Often, it was what they didn't say. They revealed information slowly. They spoke carefully. They allowed curiosity to build. And curiosity is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. When the human brain encounters incomplete information, it begins searching for answers. Psychologists call this phenomenon the curiosity gap. When information is missing, the brain becomes obsessed with filling the gap. This is why mystery attracts attention and attention creates influence. But most people unknowingly destroy their own mystery. Someone asks them about their plans, and immediately they explain everything: their goals, their timeline, their strategy, their motivations. In that moment, they lose their psychological advantage because predictable people are easy to manipulate. Strategic individuals understand something different. Information is currency, and powerful people never spend all their currency at once. They reveal information gradually, piece by piece. Imagine two people entering a new workplace. The first person immediately shares everything about themselves: their career ambitions, their frustrations, their opinions about the company. Within a week, everyone knows exactly how they think. Now imagine the second person. They observe first. They listen carefully. They speak thoughtfully. They reveal personal details slowly. Over time, people begin paying attention to them. They become curious. They begin wondering what this person truly thinks. And that curiosity creates psychological gravity. People begin taking their words more seriously. Their opinions carry more weight. Because when someone speaks less, every word matters more. But strategic mystery is not about deception. It is about discipline. It is about understanding that once information is revealed, it can never be taken back. The moment people understand your intentions completely, they can begin predicting your behavior. And the moment someone can predict your behavior, they gain power over you. This is why many influential leaders throughout history mastered the art of controlled communication. They rarely explained everything. They rarely revealed their full intentions. They allowed others to speculate. And speculation created influence, because people often imagine something far more powerful than reality. Strategic mystery protects your psychological position. It allows you to observe before revealing your strategy. It prevents others from predicting your next move. And most importantly, it forces people to pay attention to what you say. Because when someone speaks rarely, their voice carries authority. But strategic mystery alone is not enough, because even the most mysterious person can lose influence instantly if they lose control of their emotions. And this brings us to the second lesson. A lesson Machiavelli witnessed destroy powerful leaders again and again: emotional weakness. Throughout history, powerful people have been defeated by something surprisingly simple. Not armies, not intelligence, not strategy, but emotion. Machiavelli observed this pattern repeatedly while working in political circles. He watched rulers lose control of entire kingdoms because they reacted impulsively. A careless insult would trigger anger. A rumor would trigger paranoia. A small challenge would trigger a destructive decision. And once a leader reacted emotionally, their enemies suddenly knew exactly how to control them. Because emotional reactions reveal something incredibly valuable. They reveal your psychological triggers. Imagine someone discovers that criticism makes you angry. From that moment forward, they have a weapon. They can provoke you whenever they want. They can destabilize your judgment. They can force you into making decisions based on emotion rather than logic. And the moment emotion dominates decision-making, strategy disappears. This is why Machiavelli admired leaders who possessed something rare: emotional discipline, the ability to remain calm when others expect a reaction. the ability to pause before responding, the ability to observe rather than immediately react. To most people, calmness seems passive, but psychologically, calmness is powerful. When someone attempts to provoke you and you remain composed, the dynamic shifts instantly. Instead of controlling you, they become uncertain. They expected anger, they expected confrontation, but your calmness forces them into unfamiliar territory. Suddenly, they are the ones questioning themselves. This is a psychological reversal. The aggressor becomes uncomfortable. The calm individual becomes dominant. And this dynamic appears repeatedly in high-level negotiations. Consider experienced negotiators. When confronted with aggressive tactics, they rarely react emotionally. They lean back, they listen, they pause. Sometimes they respond with a simple phrase, "Interesting," or "Tell me more about that." These responses seem simple, but they achieve something important. They prevent emotional escalation, and they allow the calm individual to remain in control of the conversation. Because the person who controls their emotional state controls the situation. But emotional discipline does not mean suppressing feelings. That would simply create internal tension. Instead, it means understanding emotions without allowing them to dictate behavior. It means recognizing anger, but choosing not to act from it. Recognizing frustration, but refusing to let it distort judgment. Recognizing fear, but continuing to think strategically. The difference between emotional people and strategic people lies here. Emotional individuals allow feelings to guide actions. Strategic individuals allow awareness to guide actions. This awareness creates psychological stability, and stability creates influence. Because people instinctively trust individuals who remain calm under pressure. They appear confident, they appear capable, they appear in control. But perhaps most importantly, they become difficult to manipulate, because manipulators rely on emotional reactions. They provoke anger, they provoke insecurity, they provoke fear. When those reactions fail to appear, their strategies collapse. This is why emotional discipline was essential for rulers during Machiavelli's time, and it remains essential today. Because whether in politics, business, or everyday relationships, the individual who maintains emotional control gains a quiet advantage. They think clearly, they observe carefully, and they respond deliberately. And that deliberate response is often the difference between reacting like a pawn and thinking like a strategist. But emotional discipline alone does not guarantee freedom, because even calm individuals can still be controlled if they are emotionally dependent on outcomes. And this leads to the third lesson, a lesson that Machiavelli understood deeply: the power of detachment.
There is a brutal psychological truth about human behavior. What you are afraid to lose controls you. This principle operates quietly in almost every area of life. People remain in unhealthy relationships because they fear loneliness. Employees tolerate disrespect because they fear losing financial security. Friends accept manipulation because they fear losing approval. Fear of loss creates invisible chains, and those chains influence behavior in subtle ways. You become cautious. You avoid confrontation. You compromise your boundaries. And over time, you begin adjusting your behavior to protect what you fear losing. This is exactly how manipulation works. Manipulators identify what you value most: your reputation, your job, your relationships, your security. Then they quietly apply pressure to those vulnerabilities. But Machiavelli observed something fascinating. The people who held the greatest power were often those who were least attached. They cared about outcomes, but they were not dependent on them. This difference may seem small, but psychologically it is enormous. Imagine two people negotiating a business deal. One of them desperately needs the agreement. They have invested everything into making it happen. They have no alternatives. The other person would like the deal, but they have other opportunities. They can walk away if necessary. Which person holds the advantage? The answer is obvious. The individual who can walk away, because desperation weakens judgment. Desperation leads to concessions. Desperation creates vulnerability, but detachment creates clarity. Detached individuals evaluate situations calmly. They ask simple questions. Does this align with my goals? Does this respect my boundaries? Is this outcome truly beneficial? If the answer is no, they leave. Not dramatically, not emotionally, but calmly. And that calm willingness to walk away transforms the entire psychological dynamic. Because when someone senses you are not desperate, they treat you differently. They respect your boundaries. They negotiate more carefully. They consider your position more seriously. Detachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean you stop caring about results. It simply means your identity and emotional stability do not depend on any single outcome. You pursue goals, but you remain psychologically independent from them. This independence creates strength, because when fear of loss disappears, manipulation loses its power. You become free to make rational decisions, free to choose better relationships, free to pursue better opportunities. And this freedom changes the way others perceive you. People instinctively recognize when someone cannot be easily pressured. They recognize when someone cannot be controlled through fear, and they adjust their behavior accordingly. This is why detachment was essential for leaders navigating dangerous political environments, and it remains essential today, because the individual who fears losing everything can be controlled. But the individual who knows they will survive regardless of the outcome cannot be easily manipulated. And that psychological independence creates one of the most powerful positions a person can occupy: the position of someone who acts from choice, not from fear. By now, you may notice something interesting. None of these lessons require aggression. None require domination. None require manipulation. They all revolve around one ability: awareness. Because the most powerful individuals rarely force control. They simply understand human behavior more clearly than everyone else. And the next lesson reveals one of the most overlooked psychological tools of all. A tool that has shaped negotiations, politics, and power struggles for centuries: silence. There is a strange paradox in human communication. The more people speak, the more they reveal their priorities, their insecurities, their ambitions, their fears. But the person who speaks the least often understands the most, because silence creates something extremely valuable: observation. Most people enter conversations with a simple goal: to express themselves. They want to share opinions. They want to explain ideas. They want to prove intelligence. But very few people enter conversations with a different goal: to study the people around them. Niccolò Machiavelli spent years observing diplomats, rulers, and political advisors operating in environments where every word carried consequences. One careless statement could destroy alliances. One emotional reaction could expose weakness. One moment of impulsive speech could shift the balance of power. So the most effective political minds learned something that still applies today. Speak less, listen more, watch everything. Because when people feel comfortable speaking freely, they reveal far more than they realize. Think about a simple conversation. Two people meet for the first time. One person talks continuously. They explain their career, their opinions, their frustrations, their ambitions. Within minutes, they have revealed an enormous amount about themselves. Now imagine the other person. They ask thoughtful questions. They listen. They observe tone of voice, body language, emotional reactions. By the end of the conversation, one person has revealed everything. The other has revealed almost nothing. Which one has more information? The observer. And information creates advantage. But strategic silence does more than gather information. It also creates psychological tension. Humans are deeply uncomfortable with silence. Our brains instinctively try to fill conversational gaps. When a pause appears in dialogue, people begin speaking again almost automatically. They elaborate, they clarify. Sometimes they even contradict themselves. This is why experienced negotiators use silence deliberately. Imagine a negotiation table. One side proposes a price. Then the other side simply leans back and remains silent. No immediate response. No argument. Just silence. Suddenly the atmosphere changes. The person who made the offer begins questioning themselves. Was the price too high? Did I say something wrong? Should I explain further? And before long, they begin speaking again. They justify the offer. They reveal additional information. Sometimes they even lower their position, all because silence created pressure. Silence forces people to confront their own uncertainty. This psychological dynamic appears in arguments as well. When someone tries to provoke you emotionally, they expect a reaction: anger, defensiveness, retaliation. But imagine responding differently. Instead of reacting immediately, you remain calm. You pause. You simply observe. That silence becomes unsettling because the person attempting to provoke you suddenly loses control of the interaction. Their emotional energy has nowhere to go. Often they begin explaining themselves. Sometimes they even expose their true motivations. Strategic silence can disarm conflict without a single aggressive word. But silence also shapes perception. Think about leaders who speak rarely but deliberately. When they do speak, people listen carefully. Why? Because their words feel intentional, measured, thoughtful. Contrast that with someone who speaks constantly. Eventually, their words lose value, not because their ideas are unimportant, but because frequency dilutes impact. When someone talks all the time, listeners stop paying attention. But when someone speaks rarely, their voice carries weight. Strategic silence transforms presence. People begin associating quietness with confidence, with self-control, with authority. And these associations influence how seriously people take your words. But there is an even deeper benefit to silence. It protects your strategy. When you speak impulsively, you reveal intentions, plans, thoughts, opinions. But silence keeps your internal world protected. Others cannot predict what they do not know. Machiavelli understood that unpredictability creates advantage, because predictable people are easy to manipulate. If someone knows exactly how you will react, they can control the situation. But if your reactions remain measured and deliberate, others must approach you carefully. They cannot easily anticipate your response. This uncertainty creates psychological distance, and distance often creates respect. But strategic silence should not be confused with passivity. Silence is not about withdrawing from conversations. It is about choosing words carefully. It is about recognizing when speaking adds value and when observation offers greater insight. There are moments when speaking is necessary, moments when clarity matters, moments when leadership requires direction. But strategic individuals understand that not every thought needs immediate expression. Sometimes the most intelligent response is patience. Patience to listen, patience to observe, patience to gather information before reacting. Because the moment you speak too quickly, you reveal more than intended. But the moment you pause and observe, you begin seeing patterns others miss. And those patterns become powerful knowledge. In the end, silence is not empty. Silence is full of information. Information about people, information about motivations, information about hidden dynamics in every interaction. Those who master silence transform conversations into opportunities for learning. They allow others to reveal themselves. They preserve their own strategic position, and over time, their words gain influence precisely because they are used carefully. Strategic silence is not weakness. It is disciplined awareness. And in a world where most people speak before thinking, the ability to remain silent becomes a powerful advantage. Most people believe they understand the people around them. They listen to words. They react to behavior. They form quick judgments. But Machiavelli understood something that many people never realize. Human behavior is rarely driven by what people say. It is driven by what they want, fear, or secretly desire. In other words, every conversation happens on two levels: the surface level and the hidden psychological level beneath it. Most people only see the surface. They hear someone say, "I disagree with this idea," or "I think we should change this plan." And they assume the disagreement is about logic, about facts, about the argument itself. But often, something else is happening beneath the surface. Something invisible, something psychological. Perhaps the person speaking feels ignored. Perhaps they fear losing influence. Perhaps they want recognition. Perhaps they want to assert dominance in the group. In many cases, arguments are not about ideas at all. They are about status, identity, or insecurity. And once you begin observing human behavior through this lens, something fascinating happens. You start noticing patterns. You begin seeing motivations behind actions. Imagine someone in a meeting who constantly interrupts others. On the surface, it may appear rude or aggressive, but if you observe carefully, you might notice something else. Each interruption happens when someone else begins receiving attention. In that moment, the person interrupts to redirect focus back toward themselves. What does this reveal? A need for recognition, a fear of being overlooked. Another example: imagine someone who constantly criticizes the work of others. Every idea has a flaw. Every suggestion has a problem. At first glance, this behavior appears analytical. But sometimes, criticism serves a psychological function. It protects the critic from scrutiny. Because when someone is constantly pointing out flaws in others, attention rarely turns toward their own weaknesses. This pattern appears everywhere. In offices, in politics, in friendships, even in families. Human behavior is full of subtle psychological signals, but most people miss them because they only focus on what is said. Strategic observers listen differently. They listen for emotional tone, for patterns, for inconsistencies. They notice when words and behavior do not align. For example, someone may say they are confident about a decision, but their body language reveals tension. Or someone may claim to be calm while their tone carries frustration. These contradictions reveal deeper motivations. Machiavelli observed these patterns constantly while navigating political environments. In politics, leaders often speak in carefully chosen words. But beneath those words lie ambition, fear, and strategy. A ruler claiming loyalty may actually fear betrayal. A diplomat offering cooperation may secretly be seeking advantage. Understanding these hidden motivations allowed Machiavelli to see beyond appearances. And once you begin practicing this skill, human behavior becomes far easier to interpret. Because motivations leave traces. People reveal what they value through their reactions. Notice what triggers emotion. Notice what excites them. Notice what makes them defensive. These reactions reveal what matters most to them. For example, if someone becomes defensive when their expertise is questioned, they may strongly identify with their competence. If someone becomes irritated when ignored, recognition may be extremely important to them. If someone reacts strongly to loss of control, authority may be central to their identity. Once you understand these motivations, interactions become clearer. You stop reacting impulsively. You begin responding strategically. Instead of arguing directly, you address the underlying motivation. For instance, if someone seeks recognition, acknowledging their contribution may reduce conflict instantly. If someone fears losing influence, giving them a visible role may calm their resistance. In other words, by understanding motivations, you address the real problem, not the surface argument. This skill creates enormous advantage in leadership, negotiation, and relationships. Because while others react emotionally to behavior, you understand the psychology behind it. And when you understand psychology, you gain perspective. You stop taking behavior personally. You stop reacting impulsively. Instead, you begin observing human nature with curiosity. Curiosity replaces frustration. Observation replaces reaction. And slowly, interactions that once seemed confusing begin to make sense. But there is another important benefit to this awareness. When you understand motivations, you also begin understanding yourself. You start recognizing your own emotional triggers, your own desires for approval, your own reactions to criticism or rejection. And this self-awareness strengthens your ability to remain calm and strategic. Because the greatest advantage in understanding human psychology is not controlling others. It is understanding the patterns that shape behavior, including your own. Once you begin seeing these patterns, something remarkable happens. Conversations become clearer, conflicts become easier to navigate, and people become far more predictable than they first appear. Because beneath the complexity of human behavior lies something surprisingly simple. Human beings are driven by needs. Needs for security, needs for recognition, needs for belonging, needs for control. And once you understand these needs, you begin seeing motivations that others completely overlook. And in a world where most people react only to appearances, the ability to see deeper becomes a powerful advantage. One of the most dangerous myths about strength is the belief that strong people never change. They hold the same opinions. They follow the same strategies. They respond to every situation in the same way. To many people, this appears as consistency. But Machiavelli observed something very different in the leaders who survived the chaos of politics. The most successful rulers were rarely rigid. They were adaptable. They studied their environment carefully. They watched how circumstances changed. And when the situation required it, they adjusted their strategy. Because the world is never static. Power shifts. Alliances evolve. Circumstances change faster than anyone expects. And people who cling too tightly to one approach often collapse when reality shifts. History is full of powerful leaders who fell precisely because they refused to adapt. They believed their previous strategies would always work. They underestimated new challenges. They ignored changing conditions. And eventually, their rigidity became their downfall. Adaptability is not weakness. It is strategic intelligence. To understand this, imagine a river flowing through a landscape. When water encounters a rock, it does not stop. It does not argue with the obstacle. It simply changes direction. It flows around it. Over time, it continues moving forward. Human strategy works the same way. Rigid thinkers treat obstacles as barriers. Adaptable thinkers treat obstacles as information. Instead of resisting change, they analyze it. They ask questions. What has changed? What new opportunities exist? What strategy now makes sense? This mindset allows them to evolve while others remain stuck. In leadership, adaptability means adjusting communication depending on the audience. Some people respond to logic. Others respond to emotion. Some respond to authority. Others respond to collaboration. A rigid communicator uses the same approach with everyone. An adaptable communicator adjusts tone, language, and strategy depending on the situation. But adaptability does not mean abandoning your principles. Your core values remain stable. What changes is your approach, your tactics, your strategy. Because successful navigation of complex environments requires flexibility. Just as a skilled chess player constantly adjusts their strategy depending on the board, adaptable individuals read the situation. They recognize patterns. They shift direction when necessary. And this flexibility allows them to move forward while others remain stuck defending outdated positions. Machiavelli understood that survival often depends not on strength, but on the ability to evolve faster than circumstances change. And those who master adaptability become extremely difficult to defeat. Because while others cling to familiar strategies, adaptable minds continuously evolve. Machiavelli wrote something that remains profoundly true even today. People judge more by what they see than by what they truly understand. In other words, perception shapes reality. Your reputation influences how people treat you long before they truly know you. Think about how quickly humans form impressions. Within seconds of meeting someone, we begin making assumptions. Are they confident? Are they trustworthy? Are they competent? These impressions may not always be accurate, but they strongly influence future interactions. This is why reputation functions like invisible currency. It shapes opportunities. It shapes trust. It shapes how seriously people take your words. Imagine two individuals entering the same professional environment. One has a reputation for reliability and calm judgment. The other has a reputation for emotional reactions and inconsistency. Even before either person speaks, expectations have already formed. People trust the first individual more quickly. They listen more carefully. They value their input. The second individual must constantly prove themselves because their reputation creates doubt. Reputation operates quietly but powerfully. It spreads through observation, through stories, through the impressions people share with one another. And once a reputation forms, it becomes surprisingly persistent. This is why strategic individuals think carefully about how they behave, not because they seek approval, but because they understand that every action contributes to perception. Consistency builds credibility. Keeping promises builds trust. Remaining calm under pressure builds authority. Demonstrating competence builds respect. Over time, these behaviors accumulate. They form a psychological image in the minds of others. And that image begins influencing future opportunities. People start approaching you with assumptions shaped by your reputation. Those assumptions can open doors or quietly close them. But reputation is not built through words alone. It is built through repeated behavior, through reliability, through integrity, through emotional discipline. Strategic individuals recognize that reputation is a long-term investment. They do not seek quick approval. Instead, they focus on consistent actions that gradually shape perception. Because once a strong reputation forms, it becomes one of the most powerful forms of influence a person can possess. And influence built through reputation requires no force. It operates silently, guiding how others respond to your presence. The final lesson Machiavelli observed may be the most practical. Many people lose opportunities not because they lack intelligence, but because they allow ego to control their decisions. Ego pushes people to prove they are right, to win arguments, to defend positions even when those positions no longer serve them. But strategic thinkers approach situations differently. They focus on outcomes. Before reacting, they ask a simple but powerful question. What result do I actually want? This question changes everything. Imagine a disagreement between colleagues. One person focuses on proving their point. They argue aggressively. They challenge every counter-argument. Eventually, they may even win the debate. But in the process, they damage the relationship. The other person leaves feeling resentful. Future collaboration becomes difficult. Now imagine a different approach. Instead of focusing on being right, someone asks, what outcome would benefit everyone involved? Maybe the goal is not to win the argument. Maybe the goal is to reach a workable solution, or preserve the relationship, or gather more information before deciding. Outcome-focused thinking removes unnecessary conflict. It allows you to choose responses strategically. Sometimes silence achieves more than confrontation. Sometimes compromise leads to better long-term results. Sometimes stepping back allows a clearer perspective to emerge. Strategic thinkers understand that winning every battle is not necessary. What matters is the direction of the overall journey. Because success rarely belongs to the person who argues the loudest. It belongs to the person who moves steadily toward meaningful outcomes. When ego disappears, clarity appears. Decisions become simpler. Priorities become clearer. And actions become more effective. The world is filled with people reacting emotionally to every situation they encounter. They reveal their thoughts too quickly. They allow fear, pride, and insecurity to guide their decisions. But the individuals who understand human psychology operate differently. They observe before reacting. They listen more than they speak. They study behavior instead of judging it. These 8 lessons are not about domination. They are about awareness. Awareness protects you from manipulation. Awareness sharpens your decision-making. Awareness transforms the way you see people. Once you begin observing human behavior carefully, patterns become visible, motivations become clearer, and suddenly the hidden dynamics of influence begin making sense. This awareness does not make you ruthless. It makes you conscious. Because true intelligence is not about controlling others. It is about controlling your own reactions, your own decisions, and your own direction in life. Once you understand the psychological game, you stop being the pawn and you begin thinking like the strategist.